we're going to go ahead and get started. Just would like to begin and welcome you to our final Lunch and Learn for the spring semester. We look forward to seeing you back in June, but we're going to go ahead and just briefly introduce our speaker on today. Dr. Tanya McCoy is a passionate about supporting individuals on their journey of change, healing, and restoration. She is a licensed psychologist, licensed professional counselor, and national certified counselor, and improved clinical supervisor for LPC licensure. Dr. McCoy earned her PhD in counseling psychology with a military specialization from Tennessee State University. She also earned a Master's of Education degree in Human Development Counseling from Vanderbilt University. And she is also a proud alum of North Carolina A&T, where she earned a Bachelor's of Science in Mechanical Engineering. Her research interests are in the areas of African-American women in engineering careers and father absence across military and lower socioeconomic populations. Her workshops have focused on veterans' mental health, women's health, domestic violence, grief, stress management, goal setting, and effective communication. Again, let's welcome Dr. Tanya McCoy on speaking on a timely topic, coping with crisis. Thank you, Dr. McCoy.
Thank you, Dr. Cooper. It is such an awesome opportunity to be with you guys on this morning. I was very excited to hear that you guys are laid back because that's basically how I am. So I don't plan to wow you with some great technological, insight. I'm just going to try to keep it real, and hopefully the information that I share with you, there'll be something that you could take away for yourself or someone else. So I think at this time, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, I think we are set here. So my goals today is really to provide an overview of understanding what is an emotional crisis. Now, many of you may already know kind of what it is, but I'm going to explain it to you from a different perspective. A lot of times we don't even recognize that we're actually in an emotional crisis. And so I want to also share, how to determine if you are, or maybe you may understand more about a family member or a friend, or maybe even a colleague who may be undergoing an emotional crisis, what to do when you're in a crisis and how to help others. Now, I think in the chat, if you can, or if you don't have to use the chat, you can speak out if you feel comfortable in doing so. When you're thinking about an emotional crisis, what are some of the things that come to mind? Oh, and I forgot to tell you, this was kind of interactive. I hope Dr. Cooper told you that it was an interactive presentation. But seriously, though, when you're thinking about an emotional crisis, what are some of the things that come to mind? And I'm trying to see if I see the chat. Okay. Feeling out of control. Yes. Stress, trauma, loss. Indeed. And, and when we talk about those things, these are kind of the manifestations of it. I think trauma is kind of a characteristic of a type of emotional crisis. Feeling out of control, stress is also kind of the behavior parts that kind of associated with emotional stress. But I wanted to talk to you also about what it is as it's defined. Now, it is defined as a emotionally significant event. And I put the picture here of George Floyd because we know in society that's been a topic probably for about a year now. His death, and it was a crisis on so many levels, and it was an emotional significant event on many levels. One, because people actually witnessed this crime happening on TV, his death. But then also in the African American community, this was almost like a repeat of a racial traumatization, and so it played a part. And then also when we think about emotional crisis, it's any unstable or crucial time. So we can also think about COVID-19 coming and how, societies had to deal with that. Many people have experienced, being diagnosed with COVID, seeing their family members. And we know many people have also endured the death of loved ones. And it was even compounded with the fact that many of them could not attend, the funeral services or any type of closure services for those same people. So when we think about emotional crises, yeah, we think about that typically it is triggered by an emotionally significant event, or there could be some instability over an amount of time. And so, those are kind of two major things that has happened. But in our typical everyday life, there is a sense of stress that happens just in our personal or work life. We can think about divorce, think about death, even now, caregiver stress for many reasons. Adults are not caring for their elderly, parents at this time. Not to mention, of course, we've talked about COVID and racial tension, but financial stress. A lot of people, even from COVID, their jobs have been modified or changed. The birth of a baby, now having kids at home, where before, everyone got a break because they were at school, but now you having to educate them and also try to be their teacher, their PE coach, and everything else, mentor at the same time. Another type of crisis that can occur can also be medical conditions. We think about getting a diagnosis and then how to deal with that, whether it's terminal or not, but any type of medical condition can also put a strain. Work demands and inequities. And then what's even challenges, like sometimes we're dealing with all of these at the same time. And so we know from these crises that emotions tend to build, and sometimes they build over time, and you may not recognize it initially. And so that's why I wanted to discuss a little bit about the body stress response curve. Now, how many of you have ever seen this? No, you could not. No one? Okay. I like showing this because a lot of times we don't really understand kind of what's happening to us when we think about stress. There's a normal stress curve here. Can you see my cursor? Okay. And so we see here, this is time, and then on the y-axis is the level of stress. So we see here that there's this natural rise, and then there's this natural slope downward. And this is kind of the tension phase. So we see that after a certain amount of time, the stress level starts to decline and it goes back to normal. And that's kind of the normal stress. When we think about that with our everyday living. A little bit of stress, normal stress can help us to sharpen our senses. Sometimes we perform better. Think about if you're having a test, or if you're going up for tenure or things of that nature, writing those journal papers or anything of those nature, participating in a sporting event or a competition. We can see that normal amount of stress can result in increased performance and increased motivation. Well, as we look here in the middle, we see that this curve is somewhat different. And when we look at this curve, we can kind of see that if we look here, the level of stress is a little higher. And if we look at the time, you're staying in stress a little bit longer. And of course, it takes longer to get back to that normal baseline. We kind of consider this mild or moderate stress. And what it's telling us is that as our stress level increases, that our awareness of the environment somewhat decreases. So here, we're really focused on here and now, and it's hard or challenging to take in outside information. You may have witnessed this even with yourself or children or even others, where you call their name and then sometimes it seems like they don't even hear you, or you give instructions and it seems as though they didn't hear the instructions because they didn't do what you asked them to do. And so this is kind of showing us a mild or moderate stress response. And I will say that the body has a natural response to stress, because stress is a survival skill. So it's natural, it's innate to us. And so there is a part where, the stress level results in some of these normal behaviors. And that could be some of the anxiety and increased stress. But what I will say with this is that the stress becomes a problem when we experience it too often. So there's many opportunities for us to be stressed, many events, many situations, or we experience it too intensely. So we think about our emotions, if we're feeling overwhelmed, over a long period of time, then it can be damaging to us. And then the final curve here, which it kind of went off a little bit, I think because of the page. I'll just move this over. We see here, of course, is drastically different from the normal curve, right? So as we see here, there's a higher level of stress. Okay, it's a little steeper. We see that the time is longer as far as the time actually enduring the stress level. And of course, because of that, we see a longer time does it take for us to transition back to the normal baseline of how we actually function. And so when we think about this curve, it really represents someone dealing with severe stress. Severe stress can be seen as that, again, our awareness of the environment decreases even more so. And so at this point, a person really has difficulty taking in any type of information. Sometimes you may recognize it as people get to the point where they black out and they say they can't remember or recall any information. This is kind of at that place. Also, we've heard where people talked about, having because of the anxiety or intensity of fear, that they actually have resulted in violent behaviors, whether or not that's physically or verbally, because what has happened, the normal stress has invoked, not the normal stress, the stress level has invoked this fight or freeze response, and such that we see people engaging in some destructive behaviors at that time, either against people or against, property. So the key from these graphs to show is that stress is a problem when we endure it for a long period of time, or we experience it at very extreme levels. And so anytime you're feeling overwhelmed, extremely frustrated, that's something to take note of, as well as if you're dealing with stressors, multiple stressors time and time and time again, that is not helpful for you or your body, your physical health. Any questions so far? Okay. And I think initially when I asked the question, some of you kind of gave some of the signals of emotional stress, or emotional crisis. We talked about someone, I think, mentioned stress. There are other characteristics also to show that a person is in an emotional crisis. When we think about our relationships, if you're feeling more on edge, if you're feeling more irritable, and I apologize, the allergies have got me so congested this morning. But and so, or even feeling like a lack of connection with other people, whereas you may have been more of a social person, and now you're feeling more isolated, more detached. And so that's also a sign that someone may be undergoing an emotional crisis. We notice also in behavior changes, if you see a drastic shift in a person's mood, this person may have been happy, go lucky, talkative, and then all of a sudden they seem more withdrawn. You may notice that they're more anxious now, or you may sense that there's even more fearful, especially with things that are going on in society today where people normally are not fearful. You see people, or even children now, just being a little bit more cautious about what they're doing, where they're going. Another behavior sign is the lack of motivation, where before you were able to get assignments done, maybe work on so many different articles at a certain amount of time, and now it seems like it's just difficult just to even review or edit any articles that you may have. And you may also notice worry. So these are just a few of the behavior, signs about a person who's really undergoing an emotional crisis. I would also add depression. A lot of times, so if you notice that you've been a person who's always out engaging or doing things, outside or engaging in different activities, and then you find yourself where you prefer to stay at home, and not really engage in any activities or social events, then that's also a sign that you may be undergoing an emotional crisis. Now, there's also physical symptoms that we also may experience if we're undergoing an emotional crisis. And so, as I go through all these different signs, kind of think to yourself if you've experienced any of these things, or possibly has any of your family members, even colleagues, maybe have informed you about these things as well. Sleep is such a critical item for us. Without sleep, um, cognitions become more impaired. It's hard to focus and concentrate. So sleep is a really critical facet. So if you notice that your sleep is somewhat impaired, sometimes people notice that it's more difficult to go to sleep, and then some people notice that they wake up earlier than typical and find difficulty going back to sleep. A lot of times, a lot of distress is first noted in sleep, and you will find even when you go to your medical provider, that's one of the first questions they ask you. How's your sleep? Because it impacts so many things. Headaches, even though they may feel slight or not as important, headaches is a really important criteria to pay attention to as well. A lot of times, stressors present as headaches, and then also we think about from that stress response, continued stress, can result in hypertension. And so, one of the, of course, signs of hypertension as well is the headaches. So, anytime a person has headaches and there's a change where you didn't have headaches, or you've had headaches before, but now they're more migraines or they've changed in their intensity and their frequency. I think a change in appetite is also one that's easily noticed. A lot of times when we're stressed, we either eat more or eat less. Now, I don't know about all of you guys, but I have my favorite foods that I like. And I know when I start craving those foods, something is not right. I need to check and see what's going on. When I start craving ice cream and brownies, because that's not my typical food of choice, then, that lets me know that I'm dealing with something. Because a lot of times we're dealing with things and we tell ourselves, hey, I got this, I'm okay. I just put it aside, don't think about it, but it's still there with us. And so a lot of these behaviors, as well as some of these physical symptoms can tell us, it's our body letting us know that something is going on. Gastrointestinal problems, as well. A lot of people have talked about acid reflux and things of that nature, indigestion issues as well. Muscle tension. Oh my goodness, that is a huge one. I know when I'm stressed, I wear it in my shoulders. And so I start feeling tense in my shoulders, and that's a sign as well. I think it's symbolic of me carrying a lot of things. And so a lot of times where whatever parts of our body where our tension is stored, it kind of can reflect to us kind of how we are processing our stress. Because one of the things we know is that if you don't get the stress out of your body, it does stay in your body. And chest pains, of course, is the number one as well. So anytime, you're having any type of chest pains, we always encourage people go to the doctor because it's better to rule it out than to have something go on and you didn't, pay attention to it or get the necessary treatment ahead of time. And back to our thoughts or our cognitions, as I stated before, if you notice that you're a little bit more forgetful than you used to be, that's something to be aware of as well. Because a lot of times when we're stressed, and everybody experiences stress differently. But when we are emotionally distressed, a lot of time we're focusing on that one thing over and over and over again, so much so that we're not able to take in new information. And then what we realize is that because we're not getting enough sleep, because we're dealing with all the other mood changes, depression, anxiety, we find that we're even more forgetful than we typically are. So whereas you didn't write anything down before, all of you out there that don't need planners, so you can keep everything in your head. Well, when you start to notice that you're even more forgetful, that's also a sign to kind of check in with yourself what may be going on. Now, the next one was an interesting one because I tend to describe myself as a creative person, and I'm sure many of you out there as well, right? Like sometimes just give you a project and you come up with all these ideas and different things to try to accomplish whatever the goals that you have individually or as a team. But then you find out that those ideas are not coming. It's you finding it difficult to even come up with solutions where before you were able to process that information very quickly and come up with some different ideas and proposals. Well, that's also a sign that it could be that you're undergoing emotional stress. And of course, the last one's kind of lumped together: difficulty concentrating, planning, organizing things, and just really just being confused sometimes about what's going on. And I know I'm gonna have questions at the end, but if there's any questions right now, feel free to stop me as I go along. Okay, so now let's put in the chat box all the things that you do to relax. Or things you have done to relax. So we're going to be talking about what to do when you are in an emotional crisis. Oh, play oh, play my harp or piano. Is that right, Robin? Because at first I thought it was like play with my hair, and I know a lot of people do that as well. Harp, yes. Workout, listen to music, great. Physical activities, exercise, go for a walk, talk with a friend, awesome. Gardening, oh yeah, that's wonderful. So it looks like a lot of you do a lot of physical activity things. Go outside, yes. Yoga, oh yes, yoga is very, very relaxing. So you guys have a great list of things that you do to kind of de-stress uh, and everything. Let me go back my slides. So that's awesome. Now my question to you is, how often do you do it? And is it part of your normal schedule? And what I mean by that is that if I looked in your calendar, would I see that you marked off time or identified time for you to engage in relaxation activities? Or is it an afterthought? Now, my rule of thumb is I tell people you should start off with at least 15 minutes a day to engage in any relaxation techniques with the goal of getting to 1 hour a day. And you may say, well, Dr. McCoy, I don't have time. And then I will say, so what you're saying is everyone else, and I will respond, so what you're telling me when I hear that, what you're telling me is that everyone else is more important than you. And you've probably heard this before. Many of you flown in airplanes, and you talk about the oxygen mask. I call it the oxygen mask theory. And it says when you're traveling, in the event that we lose cabin pressure, and you're traveling with someone that's younger or needs your assistance, what do they tell you to do with the oxygen mask? Put it on the other people first, right? No, no, they actually tell you to put it on yourself first. And it's so you can't help anybody if you're not helping yourself. So if you are not having a routine where you can look at your calendar and where you are constantly and consistently engaging in self-care, because that's what relaxation techniques are, then you are actually teaching other people as well that they are more of a priority than you are. And that's food for thought. Because we do well when there's meetings for work or there's something doing with our family. We'll drop everything and we'll make sure we fit it in. But yet we don't do that for ourselves. And so we're teaching people that their needs are more important than ours. Yeah, it's a tough thing to kind of come to grips with, but that's exactly what we're doing. And so the important part of it is that you schedule time for yourself, just like you scheduled in this meeting for today. You schedule in other meetings that occur weekly or daily. I would just encourage you to do the same thing with yourself. Journal in time. That's your time for you. And also, anyone that's in your household, also encourage them to do so as well. So yeah, so here's some other techniques on there. You guys covered most of these, but reading, taking those hot baths or hot showers, walking, crafting, and as well as this 5 things grounding technique. So I want to teach this to you guys today. It's the 5 things grounding technique, okay? Okay, so all I ask you to do right now is to just be comfortable. You know, sitting in your chair, be as comfortable as you can. And if you want to, you can keep your eyes open and fix those eyes to a spot in your room. Or if you want to, you can close your eyes, whatever you're comfortable in doing. And I'll just ask you to take a few breaths, not really focusing on deep breaths, but just taking a breath and just noticing how the breath enters your body as you inhale and how it leaves your body as you exhale. And as you continue to breathe, we're all going to get on a rhythm of breathing. And I want you to breathe in through your nose in a count of 3. So breathe in through your nose on a count of 3. And then you're going to breathe out your mouth to a count of 3. So breathe in and then breathe out through your mouth. Let's do that again. And one more time. And now I want you to gently open your eyes and look around you. And I want you to name 5 things that you see. You may look out a window if you're near a window, or look within the room. Just name 5 things that you can see. And now move to 4 things you can feel. It might be the material that's on your chair. It can be your hair, your desk. But 4 things that you can touch and actually touch those items. And now 3 things that you can hear. It might be birds chirping outside, traffic noise. But just listen and try to pick up on sounds that you didn't pick up on before. Maybe things that constantly make a noise, but you typically don't hear them. So 3 of those things. And now focus on 2 things you can smell. Might be a candle, might be a flower that's blooming in your office. Might be some popcorn popping down the hall. The 2 things you can smell. And the last thing is 1 thing you can taste. Now, I know it's during lunchtime, so you may have, some recent tasted food still, on your tongue. Or you may have some candy by your desk. But 1 thing that you can taste. And now if you would do 2 of those deep breaths that we just practiced, where you take in a breath on a count of 3 through your nose, and then exhale to a count of 3 through your mouth. Do that 2 times. And when you're finished, if you don't mind either opening your mic or putting something in the chat box about how was that for you? Was there anything that you noticed differently, or anything that stood out, or something that worked well, or maybe something that was a little bit more challenging? If you could put some comments in the chat or open your mic.
This is Robin. I'll be brave. I actually feel like my heart's not beating as fast. I get nervous whenever I go somewhere with new people and just not sure if I'm going to fit in or whatever. But I'm not worried about it now. I just feel calm.
Yes, that's awesome. Isn't that a wonderful feeling? And look how long it took, Robin. I don't think it took more than 5 minutes for us to do this. And I like this technique because it's kind of a grounding technique, right? It kind of lets us know we're focusing on right here, right now. And 5 minutes, and this is an activity you can do anywhere, at home, in your office, in a meeting, and nobody really knows what you're doing. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else want to be brave?
Yeah, I'll say so. I think for me, I work out every morning at 6 o'clock, and so and that's a good time where I don't have any distraction or no meetings. But during the day, um, I find myself just meeting, throughout an entire day, and and just to take that couple of moments was a good healthy distraction to take me away from emails, take me away from just kind of a getaway, and I thought that it was unique because oftentimes I don't take that time during the day. I have specific time set aside to go work out, and I go and I do that, but something that doesn't take as much time um, like this can have so much benefit, and I think for me now, maybe on the hour or just whenever I need to do it, just just turn the monitors off and just do something like that, and not have emails to check, because emails have is a distraction within itself. So this was
Definitely.
a healthy distraction to take me away from stuff that, could over time impact our health in a negative way.
Indeed. Thank you so much for sharing that because, like you were saying, we don't realize how just 5 minutes can make a big difference. And I like that you stated that maybe between meetings or every hour on the hour, take 5 minute break and kind of engage in this. And just, I wonder what difference you'll see over a day's time or a week's time if you're able to do this as well. So definitely thank you for sharing that. I see. Oh, yes. Your emails can be very distracting, and it's the sense of urgency with emails, right? We think we've got to answer them right away and take care of that, and sometimes we sacrifice our own, time that we set aside for ourselves to answer emails. And I'm glad that this exercise was quick and helpful. Something really quick and how it makes such a big difference. So the important part to remember also is that really schedule time for yourself and make it become a habit. And actually, more than a habit, make it become a lifestyle where that you constantly and daily engage in activities that helps to calm you or helps to give you that emotional break from work. Because you think about if you're at work 8 hours a day and haven't taken a break to kind of calm or relax, that's a long time to go. And so this will also provide a good escape, right? And I think our minds we function better when we have a sense of calm. I don't know about you, but I know I remember sometimes when I had some demands for work or projects or things I needed, and I just couldn't get it together. I tried to stay up, couldn't get it. But as soon as I relaxed, sometimes even taking a nap, or if I just engaged when I went outside and just cleared my mind, then the creativity came back. I was more relaxed, and so I could then focus on what I needed to do. And so schedule time for yourself. The other part of his seek therapy, I put that on there because sometimes, we become so accustomed to not taking care of ourselves and not engaging in self-care that we might need someone to serve like a coach for us to kind of help us get in the mode of doing so. And then sometimes we're dealing with things or crises that are um, such that we need someone who's non-biased. And I promote therapy not just because I'm a therapist, but because when we talk to our friends or family, which is great, about things that are going on, sometimes we're not as vulnerable as we could be. And I think working with a therapist, somebody that doesn't know you, doesn't have an attachment to you, can be very non-biased to really get you to that place and understand how to effectively deal with the crises that may be going on in your life as well. So those two C's regarding what to do when in an emotional crisis. The first C was to be calm and kind of just relaxing, taking care of yourself. The next C is to communicate. Now, like I said before, we have some confidants that we probably tend to rely on, whether family, friends, or even colleagues. And that's fine because it's very helpful when you talk to someone, because the act of kind of letting out your feelings or maybe venting to someone, it helps you to really process them. And that's kind of what we really want, just to process kind of what's going on. I think we've been socialized to ignore our emotions and our thoughts. And really, that ends up causing us more harm than good. Because what we find out when we don't process these things, they stay with us. And that's evident when somebody could have a reaction that doesn't match the situation. So you may have said to yourself, oh my goodness, they just went off the handle for no reason. Well, chances are they're dealing with a lot of things that they haven't processed or addressed. So talking to other people is very important. Now, I also put having difficult conversations here because now when we think about difficult conversations, I know a lot of things come to mind. Difficult conversations can be with loved ones. It could be with, parents to child, partner to partner. It can be, employer to employee. And a lot of times it's really challenging to have those conversations. And so if we ignore those conversations, they stay with us. And over time, they have a negative impact on us physically and as well as emotionally. And so I always encourage people to be able to share their thoughts and emotions openly and honestly. But of course, how do you do that, right? Because a lot of times when we talk to people, we either get defensive or they get defensive. And through my work, what I found is that if I highlighted the intention versus the impact, the conversation went well. The person was able to hear me and get an understanding, and I was able to understand their intention, because we know when someone does something that bothers us, the first thing we think of, they meant to do it. I knew they meant to do it. They don't like me. That's kind of the natural thing that happens when we feel attacked or we feel hurt or wounded by what someone has said or done. And so it takes time, I think, to really come back and start off, like try to understand, what the person was intended to do by whatever they said or whatever they did, their actions. What was the intention? And then I think afterwards, do you understand the intention? My line is all I go to. Well, I think your intention, while I understand was this, that's not the impact that it had on me. And I must say, I've only tested this on a few number of people that I worked with, but I must say, and even in my own personal life, but what I found is that I'm able to get to resolve when I handle those difficult conversations in this manner. I've listened to them, they understand me, because now I'm not attacking them, I'm not blaming them, but I'm just really trying to understand what they intended, so then I can let them know that that really wasn't the impact. And then we can work through solving, okay, what was the intention and how can we do this in the future such that it has the impact that the other person was wanting. There is one model, it's called the DEAR model of assertive communication, that I use. And I'm going to teach that to you guys today as well. And before I teach it to you, again, therapy is also a good way to be able to communicate, because a lot of times, we don't know how to communicate. That was not a course in our high school or college curriculum, unless you're a communications major. And so sometimes we do have to work with other people to try to help us understand how to communicate and also to understand what barriers that we have into communicating. So I want to go to this DEAR model right quick. And this course is based on DBT Skills, which is a training program by Marsha Linehan. And so I'm going to use the trash can as my example, right? And so this is based on a couple, and one partner told the other partner to take out the trash, and the other partner said they would take it out. And so now let's use this model to walk through that. So even though the one partner agreed to take the trash out, they did not. They didn't take it out. And I don't know if there was a agreed upon time that it would be taken out. So to describe it, it would be, yesterday, you told me you were going to take the trash out and you did not. I'm just stating the facts and in an objective manner. I'm not accusing anyone, I'm just stating the facts. And then you add, express the emotion I felt. Yesterday, you told me you're going to take the trash out. You did not. I felt ignored. The next part is to assert your wishes, and that's really clearly stating what you have wanted and to be specific. Yesterday, you told me you were going to take the trash out. You did not. I felt ignored. What I wish would have happened is that you would have told me that you were going to take the trash out later or something came up. And then reinforce the person. This is where it's a win-win. How would it be a win-win for both of you? And then also, it never fails to include the words thank you. Yesterday, you told me you were going to take the trash out. You did not. I felt ignored. I wish you would have told me that you were going to take it out later than what we agreed upon. Because when you're open and honest with me, I don't have to nag. I feel supported. Thank you. Now, typically, situations like trash can arguments can go on for hours and days. And so I like this dear model because first I tell people to utilize it to get your thoughts together, because a lot of times we're responding to things that's not the incident itself. So the person was responding to feeling ignored. And a lot of times people, when you talk about the situation of the event, people start defending the event, but that's not the real issue. So I always encourage people to walk through the DEAR model yourself first before you present it to the other person. And this is such a great model. It doesn't take a lot of time, versus, an hour discussion with your partner or your kids. After working through that statement, the sentence itself, it didn't take a minute, right, to really express it. So if we can either chat for a couple minutes, someone want to tell me what they thought about the DEAR model, or if you want to put it in the chat box. Any thoughts? Have you used it before? That would be great. Or any thoughts about this? Do you see that it will work, or do you see that you have some concerns about it? If you want to unmute yourself.
Dr. McCoy, this is Robin again. I teach nursing students, so I see this as something I can really employ. They get so upset and so nervous because they're so worried about having to get an A. But of course, in the skill side, I don't want them killing people, so I know it's important. But this would be a way to help them. They get so emotional and just like a chip on their shoulder, and it's always, I hear a lot of mean conversation, and I think this would help things stay on a calmer level.
Yes, indeed. Thank you for sharing that, right? Because it really gets to the emotion, right? And after all, people are having emotional crises, and a lot of times they don't even realize it. So it's probably not right, not knowing, but it could be other things, feeling, the imposter syndrome and things of that nature. But yes, excellent.
I was just going to say that I really like how succinct this model is. I work in the counseling center, and I've done things with like nonviolent communication. And I think sometimes it's hard for people to wrap their heads all the way around that, right? Like, what need do you have that's not being met? And what are you feeling? But I think this just like lays it out so clearly and gives them like conversation prompts for like, if I'm going to have this difficult conversation, what does it look like? And it's like I'm a sort of fill in the blank style. So thank you for sharing it.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. And you're absolutely correct. And I like this model as well, too, because before we go into the conversation, we need to know what our objectives are, right? Sometimes we just want the person to understand what we're going through or what we're feeling. And sometimes we want some type of problem solving resolution. And so, yeah, definitely. This is just a great tool. There's a MAN part to it, but I usually just focus on this. The other part just really helping people to stay mindful that they don't let other people change the subject and things of that nature. But this is kind of the core that I use, and I think it helps from those that have tried it. It's made a big difference in their communication with others. So now, how to help others? Well, what I would say is that know the signs when someone's in emotional distress, really listen to them, and that's listening not to respond, but really listening to understand what's going on with them. And then if necessary, refer them to mental health providers. And it's great that you have the counseling center on campus as well. Provide support, I guess, to your students. Not sure if it's open to staff as well. That might be more EAP, but at least there are, options for people to have when addressing, these crises. And the benefits to it is that when you help other people, it does help link this sense of connection to others. And especially now with this physical distancing, people are craving some sense of connection. I think it does fortify the relationships. And I think overall, anytime you help someone, whether it's listening or pointing them to resources, you really feel good about what you're doing. And sometimes, the only thing we can do is plant a seed, and sometimes we can help walk them through the process. And sometimes, we get to see them, all the way through where they're actually able to resolve whatever crisis that they had, that they've changed. So now they're more alert, they're more happy, they feel more empowered and encouraged and more hopeful. So now we've come to the part where if you have any additional questions, I will try to answer them this time. Feel free to unmute your mic, or if you need to put it in the chat box, that's fine as well.
Dr. McCoy, this is Kate Emmerich. I also work in the Counseling Center with Lauren, and I just wanted to thank you for the exercise that you practiced with us today. A lot of the things that you've talked about today, we do, so it was really validating to have another professional to say, oh, the things that I'm doing hopefully are helpful, because I felt that they were helpful to me today. And I felt when you were talking about, the sort of the challenging, the piece where you said, so are you saying that everyone else is more important than you? And what I was arguing in my head was, well, my kids do say that they were, and during COVID, I'm stuck with them all the time. So it was really, really helpful in following that to do that exercise, because while I do that exercise with other people, I'm leading it, and it's a really different experience to lead it than to be the one who gets to just enjoy it. And I forget that sometimes. So it was, I felt an immediate sense of, being calmer, and it was a really great reminder that even when you don't necessarily have control over the amount of you time you get, there's always 5 minutes somewhere.
Yes, thank you so much for sharing that. And it's great that, and that's what I said earlier, a lot of things that I've shared today is really practical things. I don't think it's anything, I was not creating this new, technological discovery or anything of that nature. But you're right, it's good to kind of remind us of the things that we already know to do and do now. So thank you so much for sharing that.
I have a question. One of the things that I do know, especially in the Black community, is kind of like taboo to admit that, you need some counseling, you need help. How do you change that culture to get people of color to realize the importance and the benefits of reaching out to counselors when we know we need that help?
Yeah, that's such an excellent question. And I think that's one that's still being assessed even today. I think some of the things that have helped is that getting more people of color into this field, because a lot of times people look for people that they can identify with, so that's helpful. I think the other part of it is sometimes we have to share with other people that, we've done counseling. I know part of my program is that a requirement was that we also got counseling. And so, I'm not going to, suggest something that I haven't done myself. And so, and a lot of times, I will also share with people, you're getting counseling when you talk to your friends and your coworkers and things like that. They're just, you're just not getting professional counseling. And so whatever they're experiencing when they're talking to other people is the same thing. And I know there's apprehension because of historically kind of some of the things that have happened and to the communities of color. But I think I think there's more focus now on, just being even more culturally aware, being more culturally aware. And so I think part of that now is that times have changed. And so And I said all that to say one of the questions I do ask people when they're hesitant about going to counseling, I try to find out what is it that they're hesitant about. What about counseling bothers them? Because a lot of times they'll say, well, I'm not crazy. Well, you don't have to be crazy to go to counseling. That's not what counseling is about. And I just tell them, you just want somebody to hear you and understand what you're saying without, being biased. And I just tell them, give it a try, so those are some of the things you might just say, just give it a try. Just try 3 sessions and see what happens. If you don't like it, you can always switch providers, and I think just educating people more is also helpful. And I think in the communities of color, we need to do more about educating people about the benefit of counseling. But I think before, historically, it's just not been anything. Counseling to some people appears that you're weak. And I think that's some of the misnomers in or the myths in the African American community, especially. And so just trying to demystify counseling, I think, is very beneficial. And I feel like I went all over the place there. So hopefully I answered your question.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great thing, because I know here at East Tennessee State University, I do know personally, I know students who could benefit from having someone who they think have kind of a shared experience, someone that they can relate to. And I've talked with some of those students on campus, and I know it's a huge challenge for them to make that first step and go to the counseling center. That's a big step for folks. And sometimes the question that you generally ask was, well, what's keeping you from making that step? But one of the things that I do know about some of the students who I've talked with, there's a sense that if they go to the counseling center, they may not find someone there who share their experience or understand them. And that makes it very difficult for them to make that first move. So my understanding is that we're going to try to look for someone of color, but I realize I'm not a counselor, but being engineering and counseling, I mean, that's night and day kind of stuff, right? I can fix problems and solve problems, but it's not that kind of problem. But just generally speaking, those students who have opened up to me and have talked with me, I know, at least in part, a lot have to do with the fact that they don't think there's someone who could understand them. They think that their lived experiences are so different that it's not possible for someone to understand them. And I think that's a hindrance, and it's unfortunate, because I think we have some great people who can help. But perception-wise, we got to get people in.
To speak to that, Keith, it definitely feels like, as someone who is white at the counseling center, I'm not in engineering and I am in counseling, and I do very much understand and hear what you are saying, because what we're trying to sell, that once we can get them into the room, is that sense of safety once they experience that. Not sell. I used to do sales and I quit because I'm a very real person. I can't force people to buy credit cards that I know will ruin their credit. So within my authenticity, I hope to win a person over by talking openly about issues like race. But it's really, I imagine it would be really hard to come in the first time not knowing that about who they're coming to see. And especially, over this past year, not that of course it didn't exist before now, but it feels like it's so much more charged right now as well. It's hard to advertise a sense of safety to a community that feels like a white person may not be safe for me to be completely open up to. And there's nothing that they have done or said or that I know of to prove that to me. So it is a barrier, understandandly.
I think outreach works. I'm not familiar about how your program works, so I apologize if I'm speaking, from a ill-informed place. But I think also, especially what's going on, I think with students, if there's a place where they can come together, and I think if they see people from the counseling center there as well, so that looks like support as well, I think that goes over a long way. Because a lot of times it's the silence that appears to be that further fuels mistrust.
Yeah, and I think some of our most successful engagements with students of color are about offering things like Let's Talk, which used to be in the library, and I do one in athletics. where they don't have to do paperwork, they don't have to tell us their name, but it's still a barrier, right? Like it's still like I see more students of color now because I've seen students of color who will tell their friends like, she's cool. But that's, you know, I don't want everybody to have to go through that process where they just got lucky that they worked with me or worked with Kate or worked with somebody here and had a good experience. I want to reduce the barrier to even walking in the door. And so, I mean, Keith's right. I think that we have a lot of people who are well-versed in cultural humility and can do these things, but I'm like, that's not enough. Like, like I need somebody on the webpage of the staff that says like, you can come here. You don't need to be scared. This is safe objectively. And we're kind of working as a center on doing that and hoping to hire some people in the fall. But yeah, that's a very central part of sort of our concern and kind of what we're moving towards.
Great. Well, I think our time has come. I want to say thanks to all of you. Thanks, Dr. Cooper, for inviting me. Thank you for the Equity and Inclusion Committee. Also, this has been a great experience for me as well. So I really appreciate it. I'm honored by the request. Thanks to all of you for sharing your thoughts and being open about sharing your thoughts as well. So again, it was a pleasure meeting you guys. And I'm deeply thankful about the opportunity.
Okay. Dr. McCoy, really thank you as well for this. This is very important. And if you have any contacts about some of your peers who are looking for counseling positions, I know I've talked with Dan, who's over our center here. You know, he expressed the priorities that he wants to place on our next hire. And so if you have anybody that you would be willing to talk with me about who may potentially have an interest, I think the need is really here at East Tennessee State, especially now in the kind of climate that we have. It's probably more important now than it was a couple of years ago. And so it would be very helpful if you had any kind of even strategies to be able to attract. So I really appreciate your efforts and your work that you do. You know, Dr. McCoy is also an Aggie. You all, the rest of you all on the screen who may not know that, but that's North Carolina A&T State University. And I know I'm giving a plug for that right now, and I shouldn't because this is East Tennessee State. But I also I received 2 degrees from there. And, you know, those folks who are from North Carolina A&T are genuine, and not that folks from East Tennessee are not. But I take special pride when we have an Aggie being a part of what we do. And I hope we can have even more to help us. And I think in order for us to be successful with our students on this campus, we have to partner with a lot of people from everywhere in order to be successful. So again, thank you so much for you being with us. It was really, truly an opportunity for us to get a chance to hear you. And what I'm hearing so far from the folks who are on this Zoom is that what the engaging activities was very helpful. So I encourage you all other participants, Kim sent out a link that was in the chat. Make sure you complete the assessment so that we can keep continuously doing these kinds of activities for East Tennessee State University. So thank you again, and enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy the rest of your week. Thanks so much.